The relentless autumn rain had been drumming against the glass paneling of the skyscraper all morning, transforming the sprawling city of London into a blur of gray steel and weeping clouds. Robert Morgan stood motionless at the panoramic window of his office on the 42nd floor, a man who possessed everything the world deemed valuable, yet held absolutely nothing that truly mattered. At 58, as the CEO of Morgan Financial Holdings, his signature could shift global markets and his frown could bankrupt competitors. But in the deafening silence of that penthouse office, Robert felt a hollowness that no amount of asset accumulation could fill. Just moments ago, he had attempted to call his daughter, Emily, a ritual he performed every Tuesday. And just like every Tuesday for the past 3 years, the call had gone straight to voicemail. Her recorded voice, bright and distant, was a knife to his heart, a stark reminder of the betrayal she accused him of, not a betrayal of infidelity, but the betrayal of absence. She had told him during their last screaming match that he was a father only on paper, a man who sent checks instead of love, and that silence now defined his existence. Overwhelmed by a sudden, suffocating need to escape the sterile, air-conditioned prison of his success, Robert canceled his afternoon meetings, grabbed his trench coat, and did something he hadn't done in decades. He walked. He bypassed the chauffeur waiting in the Jaguar and stepped out onto the wet pavement, letting the damp chill of October seep into his bones. He walked aimlessly, his Italian leather shoes splashing through puddles, moving away from the glass and steel canyons of Canary Wharf towards the older, grittier parts of the city where the buildings were made of brick, and the air smelled of coffee and exhaust fumes. He was lost in a labyrinth of regret when he saw her. She was standing outside a small, weathering bakery, a tiny figure in a faded pink coat that had clearly seen better days, her light brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. But it wasn't her disheveled appearance that stopped the titan of industry in his tracks. It was her face. She was weeping, not with the loud, demanding tantrum of a spoilt child, but with the silent, soul-crushing despair of someone carrying a burden far too heavy for their years. It was a look of utter desolation that mirrored the one he had seen in Emily's eyes the night she walked out of his life. Against his better judgment, against the hardened instincts of a city dweller trained to ignore the suffering of others, Robert approached her slowly, crouching down so he wouldn't tower over her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rusty from disuse. "Are you all right? Are you lost, little one?" The girl looked up, her large brown eyes swimming in tears, scanning his face with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She wiped her nose on her sleeve, sniffing loudly before asking a question that struck Robert with the force of a physical blow. Are you somebody's dad?" The question hung in the damp air, heavy with accusation. Robert swallowed hard, the word yes catching in his throat because he felt like a fraud saying it. "I have a daughter," he managed to choke out. "She's grown up now." The little girl nodded solemnly, as if assessing his qualifications, and then with trembling hands she reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled, damp 50-pound note. She thrust it towards him, her small hand shaking. "Here," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's 50 pounds, it's all I have. I just need a dad for one day, just for tomorrow. Can you please be my dad?" Robert stared at the money, then at the child, his heart fracturing in his chest. In all his years of high-stakes negotiations, he had never been offered a deal that terrified and broke him like this one. "Sweetheart," he said gently, pushing the money back. "I don't want your money, tell me what's happening, where are your parents?" The dam broke then. She began to sob, the words tumbling out in a rush of misery. "My mum died last year," she gasped, "and my dad. He works 2 jobs, he's always tired. But tomorrow is the father-daughter dance at school. Everyone is going. Everyone has a dad to dance with. I asked him, but he said he can't. He has the night shift at the warehouse. If he misses it, we won't have money for the bills. I know he loves me, I know he has to work, but I didn't want to be the only one alone." She looked at the money again. "I thought if I hired someone, he wouldn't have to lose his pay. I just wanted to know what it feels like to have a dad who shows up." Robert felt a wave of nausea. Here was a child trying to rent a father to save her real father from financial ruin, while he, with all his millions, couldn't pay his own daughter to speak to him. The irony was bitter and sharp. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Sophie," she whispered. "Sophie Martinez." Robert took a deep breath. "Sophie, I cannot be your dad, that wouldn't be safe or right, but we are going to fix this. Give me your father's number." Sophie looked terrified. "No, he'll be angry." He doesn't know I left Mrs. Chen's house. He won't be angry, Robert promised, pulling out his mobile. He will be worried. A dad who works 2 jobs loves you very much. He dialed the number on the scrap of paper she provided. A gruff, exhausted voice answered. Martinez speaking. Mr. Martinez, Robert said, his CEO voice commanding yet calm. My name is Robert Morgan. I am with your daughter, Sophie. She is safe, she is unharmed, but you need to come to the bakery on Harrison Street immediately. The panic on the other end was visceral, a sharp intake of breath followed by the frantic sounds of movement. Sophie, I'm coming now if you touch her. She is safe, Robert assured him. We are waiting. He hung up and took Sophie inside the warm bakery, ordering her a hot chocolate. They sat by the window, the tension thick. 10 minutes later, a man burst through the door, rain-soaked, still wearing a high-visibility vest, his face a mask of sheer terror. Sophie, he screamed, dropping to his knees as the girl ran into his arms. Diego Martinez buried his face in his daughter's neck, sobbing openly, speaking a mix of English and Spanish, scolding her and kissing her head all at once. I thought I lost you, he wept. Mia, never do that again. Nothing is more important than you. Not the job, not the money, nothing. Robert stood in the corner, feeling like an intruder on a holy moment, watching a man who had nothing give his daughter everything he had, his presence. After the emotion settled, Diego stood up, gripping Sophie's hand tightly, and looked at Robert with wary, red-rimmed eyes. You called me, he said, extending a rough, calloused hand. Thank you for keeping her safe. Robert shook his hand, feeling the roughness of hard labor. She tried to hire me. Robert said quietly, his voice low so Sophie wouldn't hear. She offered me £50 to take her to the dance because she didn't want you to lose a shift. Diego looked as if he had been punched in the gut. He looked down at Sophie, pain washing over his features. I couldn't. I didn't know it meant that much, he whispered. I have to work. The medical bills from her mother. Mr. Martinez, Robert interrupted, a plan forming in his mind, a chance for redemption that he hadn't earned. I need to speak with you outside for a moment, privately. Diego stiffened, defensive. About what? About Sophie, Robert said, his eyes intense, and about a proposal that might save us both. The silence that stretched between the two men on the rain-slicked pavement of Harrison Street was heavy, charged with the kind of static electricity that precedes a storm. Robert Morgan, a man whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations, stood shivering in his damp coat, feeling smaller than he had in 40 years, while Diego Martinez, a warehouse packer with calloused hands and a soul weary from survival, looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and defensive pride. The neon sign of the bakery buzzed overhead, casting a flickering red light on Diego's exhausted face as he crossed his arms over his chest, a barrier against the world that had beaten him down. Talk, Diego said, his voice rough. And talk fast, I need to get my daughter home. Robert swallowed, the icy knot in his stomach tightening. I want to make you an offer, Diego. Not a loan, not a gift, but a salary. Diego let out a bitter, sharp laugh that sounded like glass breaking. A salary, for what? You don't know me. You think because you have a nice suit you can just buy people. No, Robert interrupted, his voice gaining a desperate intensity. I want to hire you to be a father. I want to set up a trust in Sophie's name that pays you the equivalent of your overtime shifts, every single month, on the condition that you take that time off to be with her. Diego stared at him, his jaw tightening, the rain dripping from his nose. You're crazy, he muttered, turning to walk away. You're some kind of lunatic. Robert stepped forward, grabbing Diego's arm, a breach of protocol he would never have dared in a boardroom. I am not crazy, Diego. I am a ghost. I have a daughter named Emily. She is 28. I missed her first steps because I was in Tokyo. I missed her school plays because I was merging companies in New York. I missed her life because I thought I was building a future for her. Now she won't even answer my calls. I have millions in the bank, and I am the poorest man on this earth. Robert's voice cracked, the raw honesty of his pain cutting through the damp air. When Sophie offered me that £50, it killed me, Diego. It killed the part of me that thought I was a successful man. I am trying to save you from becoming me. Please, let me pay the debt so you don't have to sell your time for it. Diego stopped, the anger draining from his face, replaced by a confused vulnerability. He looked at the bakery window where Sophie was waving at them, her nose pressed against the glass. It's not just overtime, Diego whispered, his voice trembling. It's the medical bills, my wife. Her cancer treatment, we owe thousands, the bank. They sent a final notice today. They said they're going to garnish my wages next week. If they do that, we lose the flat. Robert felt a surge of purpose. I will handle it. Who is the debt with? Which bank? Diego rubbed his face, looking defeated. It's a holding company. Vicious bastards. They bought the debt from the hospital. They don't care that she died. They just want their pound of flesh. They're called Morgan Financial. The world seemed to stop spinning. The blood drained from Robert's face so fast he felt dizzy. The sounds of the city faded into a high-pitched ring in his ears. Morgan Financial. His company. His legacy. The empire he had built was the monster eating this man's life. He was the reason Sophie was crying on the street. He was the reason Diego was working himself to death. The irony was a physical blow, sickening and sharp. He was standing in front of his victim, offering to be his savior. Panic rose in Robert's throat. He couldn't tell him, not now. If Diego knew he was the CEO of the company trying to evict them, he would never accept the help. He would spit in Robert's face. I know them, Robert stammered, his confident CEO facade crumbling. I have contacts there. I can make it stop. I promise you, Diego, by tomorrow morning that debt will be zero. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out his checkbook with trembling hands. He needed to fix this immediately. He frantically scribbled a check for an amount that would cover the debt 5 times over, tearing it from the book. Take this, deposit it tonight. It will clear, I swear it. Diego took the slip of paper, his eyes widening at the number. Sir, this is... I can't. You can, Robert insisted, backing away, terrified of being recognized. Do it for Sophie, just promise me you'll take her to that dance. Diego looked at the check, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. Thank you, he choked out. I don't know who you are, but you are an angel. Robert felt like vomiting. An angel, I am the devil who built the hell you're living in. Go to her, Robert rasped. Go. Diego nodded, overwhelmed, and turned to rush back into the bakery. Robert leaned against the brick wall, gasping for air, clutching his chest. He had to call his office. He had to fire the head of the debt collection division. He had to burn it all down. But as he fumbled for his phone, the bakery door chime jingled. Diego wasn't going to Sophie. He was coming back out, walking slowly, the check held loosely in his hand. His expression had changed. The gratitude was gone, replaced by a cold, dawning horror. He had read the signature. Robert froze, trapped in the glare of the street lamp. Diego stopped 3 feet away, the paper shaking in his hand. Robert Morgan, Diego said, the name tasting like poison in his mouth. CEO of Morgan Financial Holdings. The silence returned, but this time it was violent. Diego, listen to me, Robert pleaded, raising his hands. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Diego hissed, his voice low and dangerous. I saw your face on the news in the break room last week. You're the one. You're the one who authorized the aggressive collection policies. I read about it. You're the one who decided people like me don't matter. Diego crumpled the check in his fist and threw it at Robert's chest. You think you can buy your conscience? You think this money washes the blood off your hands? I didn't know it was you, Robert begged. I am trying to change it. You didn't know it was me. Diego stepped closer, his eyes blazing with a father's fury. That's the problem, Mr. Morgan. You don't know any of us. We are just numbers on your spreadsheet. You destroyed my wife's peace in her final days with your letters and your threats. And now you want to play hero with my daughter. Diego spat on the ground near Robert's expensive shoes. Stay away from Sophie. If I see you near her again, I won't care how rich you are. I will kill you. Diego turned his back, the door slamming shut behind him, leaving Robert alone in the rain with the crumpled check lying in the gutter like a dead leaf. Robert stood there, paralyzed by the truth, when suddenly a black sedan with tinted windows screeched to a halt at the curb. The back door flew open. It wasn't a driver. It was a woman with sharp features and a tablet in her hand, Sarah Jenkins, his ruthless chief of operations. Get in, Robert, she commanded, her voice cutting through the rain. Now. Robert blinked, disoriented. Sarah, what are you doing here? The board knows, she said, her eyes cold. They know you're liquidating personal assets. They've frozen your accounts, Robert. And the press is leaking a story about your daughter. You need to come with me before the police arrive. Robert looked back at the bakery where Diego was hugging Sophie and then at the car. His world was collapsing from both sides. My daughter, Robert whispered. What about Emily? Sarah's face softened for a fraction of a second, just enough to deliver the final blow. She's been arrested, Robert, in connection with corporate espionage against your own company. She says she did it to destroy you. The interior of the sleek black Mercedes was a hermetically sealed capsule of silence, save for the rhythmic swishing of the wipers fighting the London deluge. Robert sat in the back seat, the dampness of his trench coat seeping into the plush leather, starring at the back of the driver's neck, while Sarah Jenkins tapped furiously on her tablet next to him. "We have a crisis management team waiting at Canary Wharf," she said, her voice clipped and efficient, unaware that the man beside her was currently dismantling the very foundation of his life. "If we spin Emily's arrest as a mental health episode, we can save the stock price. But you need to publicly distance yourself from her. And regarding your accounts, the board is willing to unfreeze them if you sign the new aggressive asset recovery protocols immediately." Robert looked out of the tinted window at the blurring city lights. The aggressive protocols, that was the polite corporate term for what they were doing to men like Diego Martinez. Evicting widows, garnishing the wages of warehouse packers, crushing little girls who just wanted to dance. "No," Robert said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a gavel strike. Sarah stopped typing. "Excuse me." "I said no." Robert turned to face her, his eyes clear for the first time in decades. "Turn the car around, take me to the police station, and give me that tablet." Sarah scoffed. "Robert, be reasonable. You are risking the entire holding company. If you don't sign these papers, the board will vote you out by morning. You will walk away with nothing." Robert laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Sarah, I stood on a street corner 10 minutes ago and realized I already have nothing. I have £1 billion in assets, and I couldn't even buy a moment of peace for an 8-year-old child." He snatched the tablet from her stunned hands. "I am still the CEO until the markets open tomorrow, and I have one final executive order." Robert's fingers flew across the screen, accessing the central mainframe of Morgan Financial. He navigated to the distressed assets folder, the list of thousands of families, including the Martinez family, whose debts were being sold for pennies to predatory collectors. With a few swift keystrokes, he initiated a protocol known as debt forgiveness write-off. It was a nuclear option, intended for tax purposes on bad loans, but Robert applied it to the entire consumer debt division. "What are you doing?" Sarah screamed, lunging for the device. "I am balancing the books," Robert said, hitting execute. A progress bar flashed green, processing. 100% complete, debt voided. In a matter of seconds, he had vaporized millions of pounds of potential profit, but he had liberated thousands of families from the crushing weight of his own greed. Diego Martinez's medical debt was gone. "You've destroyed us," Sarah gasped, pale with shock. "You've burned the company to the ground." "No," Robert replied, handing the tablet back as the car pulled up to the grim brick facade of the police station. "I just cleaned the rot out of the foundation. You can tell the board I resign." He stepped out into the rain, leaving the car, the job, and the legacy behind. Inside the station, the fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. He found Emily in an interrogation room, looking small and defiant in a gray jumper, her mascara smeared. She looked up as he entered, her eyes narrowing. "Here to scold me on press management, father? Or did you bring a lawyer to make sure I don't tarnish the Morgan name?" Robert sat down opposite her, the metal table cold between them. "I dropped the charges, Emily. The company won't prosecute. You're free to go." Emily blinked, her sarcasm faltering. "What? Why? I tried to leak your files. I tried to ruin you." "I know," Robert said softly. "And I deserved it. You were screaming for attention, and I was too busy listening to the stock market. I haven't been a father, Emily. I've been a financier. And today, a little girl named Sophie taught me that you can't outsource love." He reached across the table, not to hold her hand, but to simply rest his palm on the surface, an offering. "I resign tonight. The money is mostly gone. I suspect I'll be tied up in lawsuits for the next 5 years. I won't be the great Robert Morgan anymore, but I would very much like to apply for the position of your dad. Entry level, no salary." Emily stared at him, searching for the trick, the leverage, the catch. But she saw only a tired, wet, aging man who had finally stopped running. Her lip trembled. "You're an idiot," she whispered, but she didn't pull away when he finally reached out and covered her hand with his. The following evening, the gymnasium of St. Jude's Primary School was transformed into a wonderland of crepe paper streamers and fairy lights. The air smelled of cheap floor wax and expensive perfume. Robert stood outside in the dark playground, collar turned up against the wind, watching through the open double doors. He wasn't invited, he wouldn't dare intrude, but he needed to see. The music started, a slow, sentimental ballad. He saw them. Sophie, radiant in a second-hand, sparkly blue dress, her hair done up in a perfect bun, and Diego. Diego looked tired, but he was wearing a clean suit, likely borrowed, and he was smiling. He was holding his daughter as if she were made of porcelain, spinning her slowly on the dance-floor. He wasn't at the warehouse. He wasn't worrying about the debt collectors, because that morning, he had received a notification that his balance was 0. Robert watched the man he had almost destroyed being the father Robert had failed to be. It was the most painful and beautiful thing he had ever seen. As the song ended, Diego looked towards the open doors. He couldn't possibly see Robert in the shadows, but he paused, looking out into the night. He gave a single, slow nod to the darkness, as if acknowledging a ghost. Robert nodded back unseen, tears finally spilling over his cheeks, not tears of loneliness this time, but of release. Robert turned to leave, the gravel crunching under his shoes. He had no car waiting. He would have to take the bus back to the small flat he had rented that morning. His empire was dust, his reputation was in tatters, and he was facing a future of uncertainty. But as he walked out of the school gates, his mobile phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen lit up with a name that hadn't appeared in 3 years: Emily. He stared at it for a moment, the rain washing over the screen, and then with a trembling thumb, he slid the bar to answer. "Hello," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Hi, Dad," Emily's voice came through, hesitant but there. I bought a pizza. It's too big for one person. Do you want to come over and help me eat it? I want to hear about this Sophie girl." Robert looked back at the city skyline, the glass towers of finance looking cold and distant in the distance. He turned his back on them and started walking towards the tube station. "I would love that, Emily," he said, and for the first time in his life, Robert Morgan was moving towards something that truly mattered. He was finally going home.